We're also fortunate to have Zahra Baloo, who's the executive director of the San Francisco Bay Area office of CAIR California, and Kalia Abied of Pillars Fund. So we have a terrific lineup, and we're fortunate to have you with us, Imran. Can we bring Robert on? Robert, are you there? While they're trying to get Robert, we're having again some technical difficulties. I do want to give you some idea about who he is. He's got an excellent bio. He is our government affairs director for the Council on American Islamic Relations since 2011. He is hi, Robert. Just singing your praises. Hold on a second.
Oh, thank you. Keep on going.
Okay, I will. Since 2011, you've overseen CAIR's Muslim civic engagement and empowerment programs that bring American Muslims. We bring our concerns to Congress, the White House, federal and state agencies. So coordinating national and state elections, getting out the vote campaign, election surveys, and served on the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, steering committee chairman for the National Muslim Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill, which we missed this year. I know you're sad about that, but next year, inshallah, under better conditions. And you just do such a great job of encouraging Muslim participation in networks and coalitions that promote justice, and mutual understanding. And you know why I really like your resume, Robert?
Why?
Because we're both UF alumni. Go Gators!
Yeah.
Okay, good. You guessed it. So Robert and I both graduated from the University of Florida. And there's another person, panelist, who also graduated from the University of Florida, and that's Kalia. She's going to join us later. So UF is taking over. I'm sure that the UF fans will love that. But anyway, let's get into it because we have 30 minutes and we have a ton of content to go into.
Yeah, I'll get started. Okay. Robert, it's good to see your face here. So I hope everything is good with you, inshallah, and the kids. But I know the census, is really sort of something that we're doing, from the comfort of our homes now. It can be done online. So let's talk about the census a little bit. What is National Census Day and what's National Muslim Census Day? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. So April 1st, just a day ago, Wednesday, everyone in the nation should have received one of these by now. And what is in this letter? It is an invitation to take part in the census. It has a special code in there. I can either go online and complete the census. I just have to go to census.gov, or I can call it in, or I could, respond in fashion and just mail it back out. And so there's a lot of options to complete the census. Now, National Census Day is good for everyone, but it's a Wednesday. So Friday, tomorrow, that's National Muslim Census Day. And CAIR has been working with the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, Shura councils across the country. And initially, we were going to encourage imams to, inside the masjid, tell the congregation to, fill out the census, to get more information about Muslim neighborhoods in that federal registry, so that over $675 billion in federal aid that, is distributed to communities based on population, location, that it could better fund SNAP in Muslim neighborhoods, healthcare, education, transportation. You understand what I'm talking about. But the masjids, they're closed. We're doing social distancing. So CAIR is now calling on imams who have taken to the internet, who are just live streaming amazing sermons, to throw in a couple good nudges for the census and remind Muslims that, again, we have the power to be better represented. And that's the whole thing. Muslim neighborhoods, Muslim communities, wherever there's a Muslim, we should be getting a better fair share of federal and state funding. And that's the way we're going to do it.
Super important information. I mean, we've been working on that stuff in Arizona as well. So trying to really get the community out there. So Jazakallah khair for filling in those blanks for us there.
Most definitely.
Just to sort of move on to a topic that's at the top of a lot of people's minds right now. I think a lot of people are wondering about this, the Coronavirus Economic Stabilization Act of 2020. A lot of people use us as their primary resource of news and things like that. So I think it's a good time to talk a little bit about that so people from our community can really get the lowdown on what's going on.
Definitely. So, there's been a number of aid packages that have passed, and, there's a category that's going to just individual Americans, helping them out. So everyone's aware that the direct federal payments will be going out. If you qualify, you'll be getting a check for up to $1,200 as an individual. If you make up to $75,000 as of calendar year 2018 when you did your taxes Hope you did your taxes. Or if you're a couple, you could receive $2,400 if you make up to $150,000. If you have children, and God knows I and you do. I think I changed my daughter's diaper during a staff meeting on Zoom today. If you have children 16 or under, you'll be getting an additional $500 for each child. And those payment amounts, they decrease if you make more than $75,000, but less than $99,000. And for those who are unemployed, in part of this federal stimulus package, there's an additional $600 that will be added onto unemployment, and that will last a full 4 months, which is several more weeks than the normal unemployment length. And I'm sure if this social isolation keeps on going, that Congress may renew this in the future. But at least there's a lifeline to individuals. I already know some people that are looking forward to this, that need it. It's tough for a lot of people out there. 1/3 of Americans have been laid off. Now, when you look at the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Stability Act, there's a number of loans through the Small Business Administration that people, consulting their imams, figuring out if you want to take an interest-bearing loan or not.
Is that going to include nonprofits, Robert, as well, when you say small businesses?
Yes, it does. I was going to throw that in there. So there's a lot of loans with low interest rates or no rates available to not only small businesses, but nonprofits. Of course, you have to check with the Small Business Administration or bank lenders that are approved by the Small Business Administration. But one of the most talked about programs right now is the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is a $349 billion fund for businesses and nonprofits that have been significantly impacted. And there's a calculation there to figure out how significantly impacted that would be. But if you qualify, it would cover at least 8 weeks of payroll for current employees or recently furloughed employees. And if you spend up to 75% of that money directly on payroll, and the rest covering things like utilities or mortgage or rent, there's a high rate of loan forgiveness. So you actually wouldn't be losing that much money, and the rest of it can be packaged into 10-year term loans at a low interest rate around 4%. And it looks like if you're, what's a small business? That's a business with 500 or less employees, or a nonprofit as well. So there's a lot of lifelines out there.
Clear, CAIR is not taking. What? Sorry, Robert. I think our connections are a little bit off. I was just saying, wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we're not suggesting that anybody go out and take interest. Nope. I know that, we're not taking a position about that. And that's definitely something that is in some of these stimulus packages. We're going to continue researching this. Robert is becoming, mashallah, an expert in this field already. He has so much knowledge. I'm amazed at the level of detail that with which he understands the stimulus package. And inshallah, in the future, we'll be able to answer questions regarding, which aspects of the package involve interest and not. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions from the.
And again, CAIR doesn't necessarily, we don't endorse interest loans, but we're just making information available, and you would always have to contact your local Islamic scholars and, do what is right for you religiously.
Thank you so much, Robert. We really appreciate you coming on. I know that you have a little baby and a busy son that chasing them around. It means a lot that you take time out of your schedule to come and spend time with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And this has been a real fun program to watch on the sideline. So I hope to be back.
You're Robert.
And even with the technical difficulties, we're still cooking. Okay, Robert, I'd like to introduce our next guests, Kali Abied and Zahra Balu. I'd like to talk about their bios because they're phenomenal, and we're so fortunate that they're willing to come on this program tonight, leading very busy lives. Kali is the Managing Director of Strategy and Partnership at Pillars Fund, known for creating a long-term investment strategy that aims to empower and support American Muslim communities. She also sharpens, communicates, and executes the organization's vision and strategy. Prior to joining Pillars, she spent 4 years working with community-based organizations, faith groups, and national coalitions to advance justice for immigrants, Muslims, and communities of color in the U.S. Kalia has more than 15 years of experience as a newspaper journalist and editor. Her publications, her works have been published in the New York Times, Washington Post, The Nation, National Public Radio, Radio Public International, so many outlets out there. She's also a University of Florida alumni. We actually were in the MSA together back in the day. We called it, I think, Islam on Campus, right? IOC, yeah. So we go back. I'm so glad to have her here. And I also want to give a shout out to our own Zahra Balou, who serves as the executive director, again, of CAIR California, our San Francisco Bay Area office, the oldest and one of the largest CAIR chapter offices. So since joining back in 2009, Zahra has led the organization through a period of six-fold growth. Today, she manages one of our largest offices with a team of civil rights and social justice advocates dedicated to the empowerment of American Muslims. We just had one of her attorneys, the immigrants' rights attorney, Brittany Rezai, come on a couple of nights ago. So catch that episode if you didn't already. Again, under Zahra's leadership, they filed lawsuits under United States Department of Justice, sued Abercrombie and Fitch successfully, Southwest Airlines representing American Muslims, you name it, they've solved it. So we're so lucky that she's here. Thank you so much. My first question, actually, Imran, you want to go ahead and start out? I'm sure that you have some questions.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So, I mean, it's always good to talk to Zahra. We're always, benefiting from her knowledge. But, we're seeing the news cycles sort of perpetuating certain narratives that are out there. But with any type of crisis, there are always, the unseen people that are out there. So how do you think, we're seeing class and socioeconomic status play out during this pandemic, something that's really unprecedented in our own lifetimes?
Thanks, Imran. Thanks to Nat and CAIR National for hosting these. It's nice after being on a bunch of meeting videos all day to be on a conversational video where we're talking about what drives us in this work. Before actually class and socioeconomic status, the one thing that's top of mind for me based on a conversation earlier today is also just race, right? We're in this really interesting moment, particularly in the Muslim community, where we have been, I think, accustomed to 20 years, if not more, in many parts of the Muslim community of hate crimes, hate attacks being the ones that are demonized. And so I think it's important that Muslims be taking a step back and saying, Muslims and particularly South Asian and Arab immigrants, first and second generation, taking a step back and saying, okay, what about our East Asian brothers and sisters and how is this happening, right? I was just in a conversation about how Filipinos are being accused of being Chinese and Korean individuals are being accused of being Chinese. And I thought, how similar is that to when Sikhs are accused of being Muslim? But, the class and socioeconomic piece is interesting for me. I think about how I've been in shelter in place for several weeks now, and the leasing office at my apartment building is closed, but the cleaning staff are still working. Right. And in many cases, they don't have protective gear. They're taking out the trash. They're having to interact with residents at our complex. I make it out to the grocery store once a week, and I think about how the grocery store workers don't have protective gear. And it's important that we're celebrating the doctors and the nurses and the people that are doing the medical work, but grocery store workers are frontline workers too right now. We all need our milk and our ice cream and our flour and toilet paper, right? And how does that get staffed? We've seen just this week, I thought Instacart workers were talking about a strike. Amazon and Whole Food workers are talking about a strike because they're getting an extra $2 an hour at best to do some of the most dangerous work right now, which is to interact with us as we go out and hoard groceries, irrespective of whether we may have symptoms or not. And then, the other group that comes to mind for me around how class and socioeconomic status is playing out is people who were already struggling financially. So they are unhoused, right? We've seen pictures out of Vegas, for example, where there are dozens, if not hundreds of vacant hotels, massive casinos that are vacant. And you have city officials drawing lines on empty parking lots. So unhoused people could sleep on the streets 6 feet apart from each other. But these hotel rooms are vacant, right? And so there's just a lot going on. And it's important for me to lift up those people, knowing one, that I just have a lot of privilege in this moment, right? Anyone that I think still has their job right now and still has a roof over their heads and knows where their funding may come from is really blessed right now.
That is a great perspective. I'm really glad that you're bringing that to the Daily Dose. I want to reach out to Kali and ask, what is your view? How is this public health and economic crisis exacerbating the existing disparities that Zahra is pointing out here?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, first of all, for having me on. It's wonderful to be with friends and colleagues and old school mates as well. I mean, I really appreciate you, Zahra, for just bringing up everything that you did. And I think, you know, from the beginning, it just struck me how people who were already struggling with like unemployment or underemployment were going to be the first to take hits, right? And I think we know that for Muslims, the ISPU estimates about 30%, right, of Muslims are considered low income. And so these are folks whose jobs will be on the line probably first, right? And we've already heard about rounds and rounds of layoffs and furloughs. And I think, you know, it's really important that we remember that this isn't just something happening outside of the Muslim community. This is happening right to people that we're in community with, in religious community with. So that's sort of first and foremost. And then I'm thinking about how Muslims are so overrepresented in some elements of the gig economy, right? Ride share and other types of jobs that just, you know, there is no work right now. If people aren't going back and forth from place to place, there are no places to drive people, right? And this is real. And I mean, even with taxi drivers in New York City, we know that that's like the most overrepresented job in New York City for Muslims. So I think I'm thinking about a lot of folks that we see and interact with in, you know, everyday interactions that we don't necessarily actually see, right? Like how many times do we just hop in a Lyft and don't like actually really truly engage with that driver? And so I guess I'm thinking about, and I was thinking about a funny stat from ISPU about how like the most common name for taxi drivers in New York City is Muhammad. Like that's, you know, that's pretty significant. And thinking about all of these workers who are no longer scrambling to find a place to pray on Fridays. You know, as we always see these yellow taxis parked in front of a makeshift masjid, like that's just not happening right now. And just thinking what the long-term ramifications of that is going to be. And these are already jobs that were, you know, not paying so well and needing to be unionized and things like that. So I think that's one side of what I'm thinking about. But the other part I'm thinking about is within like the healthcare system in this country and how it's already earned so much distrust of people of color throughout the course of our history. The cultural barriers, including language that will prevent people from getting the treatment that they need, or, you know, the inability to, you know, this fear around insurance and being underinsured or not insured. Will they seek the help that they need, or will they seek testing if they think it's going to be an economic hit? And then, you know, just many, many pronounced and documented cases of, you know, people being discriminated against by healthcare professionals just in, you know, over the course of history, and this real distrust that exists. So I'm thinking about all these things existed pre-COVID. How will that impact how people seek the help that they need in this really dire moment?
That's great, Kalia. Yeah, all that we don't see. We had Shireen Soliman come on a couple of nights ago. She talked about what it's like in the artist community. You're an activist. I just read out your bio. And I want to know from you, you know, how is that community being impacted in this moment? Well, you know, they benefit by the government's current plan. Like, what are your thoughts on some of the things that Robert said earlier? Is there any hope in this sector? There's an infinite amount of issues that we have to solve on a daily basis and a finite amount of resources. And those resources were so finite previously. You know, there's a lot of concern around it getting smaller and smaller, but yet the needs aren't changing. The needs are actually expanding.
Definitely. I feel, was that question directed at me? Or okay, sorry. I was like, either one. Yeah, no, I think we're thinking, you know, at Pillars, we work with a lot of activists, a lot of artists, nonprofit leaders such as yourselves. And you're right, like this need is expanding. It's, you know, no one is like, oh, we're good on budget, right? Like we have a, you know, multi-year runway. Like that's not actually what the situation is. We've seen hundreds of nonprofit budgets, and we know that what's the truth is a lot of our organizations are, you know, hiring activists, and this isn't wrong, right? But on like contractual bases, right? So not everyone is a full-time employee. A lot of people are what, you know, 1099 employees, and that's just, you know, those jobs have even less security. And so we don't tend to think of like artists and activists as like so-called frontline workers in the same way that we would grocery store workers or healthcare workers, but we're all at home consuming art right now. We're consuming culture that has been produced by these people who now are getting their, their gigs canceled, their speaking engagements, their concerts. We were scheduled to be at South by Southwest with Muslim filmmakers and musicians who were really excited to feature their work. So not only are they taking an economic hit, it's like dreams that have been dashed, right? Like these, these just like these once in a lifetime opportunities that are slipping out of people's hands. And so I can talk about that all day, but I think this is now the time that, for those of us who can, to step in and increase the generosity and not pull back out of fear.
Great point.
Can I add something to that really quick, Danette? So I really appreciate what Pillars Fund does, mashallah, to support artists and activists and thinking about the importance of pop culture change work generally that Pillars Fund has been doing. A parallel to that for me in our community, knowing that a lot of the listeners today are likely from within our own community, is where imams and Islamic workers have fallen in this moment, right? So we know that a lot of our communities, like most inspirational speakers, are individuals who travel from city to city. Like they give up time with their families to raise money for our organizations, right? They speak at the banquets, you see them at the masjid, they're giving the khataras, and that's one level of the speakers. The other, of course, like a parallel tier there is the imam at your local masjid. So we've already started to see and hear stories, unfortunately, of imams having their wages cut, being let go, in this moment. And it's so sad that the people that we would trust to nurture our hearts throughout the year are the first ones to get cut. And so naming that also is, I was talking to a friend yesterday, a couple of days ago, who's a spiritual leader, teacher. And I was like, you are helping people right now because you are also stopping the spread of the virus by coming online and giving spiritual talks, right? You are a frontline worker. And so I think it's important that for us as communities, community organizations, community leaders, members of our masajid, that we be thinking, how do I sustain my imam and his or her family right now? Because if your imam gets COVID, right, and you weren't already providing healthcare, which is the case for a lot of these situations, then what happens, right? And what does that do for the longer term health of the community?
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to a really good question. I know that you have a hard stop tonight. Hopefully Kylie can stay on a little bit longer so we can ask her a couple more questions that viewers want to know. But Zahra, what are the ways that those with privilege that, in this moment can really help? Real talk.
Yeah, it's I guess there's a few things, right? And I've got time. I'm down to hang out with you guys for the rest of the hour. There are a few things. One, I'm thinking for those of us who have the privilege of working from home, work from home, right? Like the first thing is to stay at home and stop the spread of this virus. I have a couple of my best friends are doctors and pharmacists, and every day I wake up to like the newest mutation news and what the drug research is. And I'm like, the best thing I can do, right? Because I have a job and I have a roof over my head and I can earn my paycheck from home, stay home. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I've been hearing from some people that I think is a really interesting idea is if you qualify to get the aid that's coming down, the $1,200 per person, but you haven't had a loss in income, or you can afford to part with that, to consider parting with it, right? To like put it into a mutual aid fund. I know that that's a question that comes up a lot, is what is mutual aid? Well, I don't trust the government. I don't trust the doctors. What do I do? Communities are coming together to help people. And so we're seeing a lot of nonprofits and even just like grassroots, grassroots efforts of people coming together. Contribute to that. Give it to your local masjid that's running a food pantry. This is a moment where those of us who are comfortable financially are going to be asked to dig deeper. And this is a moment from our tradition, right? Is we're supposed to give until we're uncomfortable. And the reality of it is, like, many of us have not experienced financial discomfort quite yet in this pandemic, right? And so what are we going to do with that privilege? The other examples that come to mind for me are a number of organizations are running action alerts and phone banks right now because the census needs to get filled out, as Robert talked about, right? So we need to call people. Like out of CAIR Bay area, we are running a remote phone bank twice a week, where volunteers and staff get on the phone and they're literally calling people to have personal conversations to say, please fill out the census while you're at home. give time, right? If you have time right now, give time. Groups like American Muslims for Palestine are saying, email your members of Congress to support COVID relief in Palestine, right? Where we know apartheid Israel continues to violate the human rights of Palestinians, even despite the pandemic. And so send a letter. I have a voice there, send a letter. And then the last thing that comes to mind for me is to check in on people, right? What's been most helpful for me as someone who lives alone and has really struggled with being an extrovert, like away from family, away from college, away from everyone. Like I don't see people for days at a time, is people who like text me and they're like, can I drop off food 6 feet away from your apartment? Do that because you have resources or you have the mental health to help someone right now.
You give so much of yourself, Zahra, to the community. If I can just I feel like I have to insert CAIR into this because I feel like our organization is one that people don't always connect the fact that we provide economic relief. We had Brittany who came on the other night and she was with Gadir and they talked about prisoners and talked about people in ICE detention and how, we're fighting for them or getting them, adequate provisions, soap, right? Food. We have people starving in Ramadan, people who lose their jobs because of discrimination. I mean, there's a huge economic impact to Islamophobia. And, I just think all nonprofits right now are worried, but we place our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we'll be able to continue to do the work that we're called to do to fill these needs. Because ultimately Allah is the provider. He's Ar-Razaq. I'm sorry, Imran, what were we going to say?
No, I was just going to kick it over to Kalia because I know they have a lot of solutions at Pillars Fund. I know they're doing a lot of great work for the community as well. So if you could just, I know we gotta close out soon. So Kalia, what are some of the things that Muslim-led nonprofit organizations are doing right now to support the communities?
I think solutions is a strong word. I think everyone is really, really doing their best. But we're so lucky to have such amazing nonprofit leaders. But I first want to plus one what Zahra was saying about checking in on people, especially with Ramadan coming up. I think about this now. I've been Muslim, alhamdulillah, for more than 20, I don't know, something 20-ish years. But alhamdulillah, I'm part of a community and I have a really strong community here in Chicago who we are able to check in on people, but it's really, really lonely for a lot of converts, especially. And I'm only I'm thinking about my first Ramadan, and how community centric it was. And for people who are newly Muslim, for them to go into Ramadan this year and have virtual suhoor chats, it makes me really, just my heart really goes out to them. So seriously, I just want to really, really amplify that point. But so thinking about our sort of this really amazing network of Muslim nonprofit organizations, what we're seeing is that the people, we needed a few days to adjust and be okay, this is real, this is really happening, we're really sheltering in place, what does that mean for our work? And then people just kicked into gear. And what I'm finding is that people are doing what they do already, but just doing it in this new context. And so now is not the time to pivot and be okay, we normally do mental health aid, but now we're just going to become a food pantry. No, there are amazing food pantries. Go support those, or find a way to link up with them. So I'm thinking about, we've already heard about the census and GOTV. Obviously, this is the worst year. If there was a year for a global pandemic to happen, this is, Allah knows best, but oh my gosh, talk about a challenge, right? Everything is we feel everything is on the line, and it's oh, here's another curveball in a multi-year series of curveballs. Mental health support is an area at Pillars where we are really feel really strongly about, and so we're working with Muslim Wellness Foundation, with Rania Awad at the Stanford Muslims and Mental Health Lab, right? These amazing people who are making sure that our people are well, working hand in hand with religious leaders and scholars, or who are scholars in their own right. And just checking in on people and making sure that people have the tools to deal with, the mental health ramifications that are, again, being intensified by this moment. And then I also wanted to mention, things like Believers Bailout or other people who are working on issues related to money bail and how this is impacting, again, another place where Muslims are, represented is in the mass incarceration system, whether that's in local jails, ICE detention, other forms of detention that we probably don't even know about if we're being honest. How are we remembering them in this moment? How are we supporting the organizations that are reaching out to them directly? So there's a ton of pen pal efforts and Ramadan care packages and so on that, can be supported. So I think those are a few, just a few of the really amazing examples, I think, of how Muslims are showing up in this moment and how we can join them.
That's a great point about converts, Kalia. We were new converts together, I think, back in the day, and thinking back to those times is so important right now more than any other year, because that isolation is intensified. So yeah, reach out to converts. We kept you on longer than the show is allotted because there's so much to say and too little time, but can you all just give us some parting thought, each of you, please, in less than 30 seconds for our viewers to take away? Kalia?
I want just to echo what I just said, not to plus one myself, but I think, do what you do. And really, everybody has their own skill or resource that they bring to the community. So I don't, now's not the time to doubt your skills and your expertise. There's room for so much work. So if you're an artist, create and take the space you need to do that if you can, right? If you can give, and just, don't just do you, but times 100, but take care of yourself. Times 100.
I like it. How about you, Zahra?
It's funny, I'm such a brat. I'm what do you mean you have to sign off? This isn't television, it's Facebook. We could stay an extra 5 minutes. I'm going to take 45 seconds. But this is, yeah. So I'm thinking, so 1+1 to everything Kalia said, I want to lift up a number of the organizations that we've talked about. So in addition to the Muslim Wellness Foundation, a close partner of ours at CAIR is the Khalil Center that provides mental health services across the country and are just such a great resource. In addition to Believers Bailout, I'm also thinking about the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, which for a long time has really focused on serving Muslim political prisoners in the US, right? A lot of people who've been in jail for over a decade who are going to need our support now more than ever. But really the big thing for me as I talk with all of us here is we are also lucky. All of us are sitting in our homes, right? All of us are sitting in our homes. All of us are still working. And I'm thinking about, people who have to go out and put themselves on the front line to work. Again, our doctors, our nurses, our medical professionals, our grocery store workers, our janitors, and then the most vulnerable in our communities, the unhoused, the underemployed, people who are going to be hit harder than the rest of us. And so my hope and my invitation to people who are tuned in today is to say, let's dig really deep. To Kalia's point, we've got to take care of ourselves, but this is a time for us, right? Someone said this, another group I really love is Institute of Knowledge, where my brother is a teacher. They said on one of their webinars, for us, the best outcome, right, is that we made something good out of this horrible situation. And the worst outcome is that we were tested in this way and we didn't do anything with it, right? So those of us who have privilege have an incredible opportunity and really an invitation to give more, do more, say more, and be more, so that when we leave this, right, when we are all done, and inshallah, looking back at this really difficult time, we can say, but we did something with what we had.
Inshallah, we'll pass this test. You always, every time I hear you talk, mashallah, you always make us remember our privilege and remember those that, like Kalia said, unseen, and really, really bring generosity to our hearts. And I don't think I've ever seen you speak, Zahra, that you don't remember those who are poor or in prisons or forgotten. And I really, really appreciate you and value you for that. And Kalia, thank you for everything that you're doing to support nonprofit organizations, to empower Muslim-led organizations around the country. It is such a blessing and a barakah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you all in rizq in this life and in the next, inshallah. Thank you for joining us. Imran, do you want to say anything to our guests?
No, thank you so much for having me on. It was truly a joy, and may Allah bless CAIR for what they're doing during this difficult time. I mean, these conversations are extremely important. So bringing in experts from all over the spectrum within our community, I think, is really something that's uplifting, is going to be extremely useful for our community as we get through this crisis. So everybody just stay healthy, drink lots of water, use this opportunity to work on our deen and work on our health as well. So, I mean, just utilize this opportunity and everybody stay safe, inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Thank you so much.
And tomorrow they have Dalia Mogahid coming on the COVID conversations, and everybody just check out cairnewsroom.com. I know they wanted to plug that as well. So we will see you soon, inshallah.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope you'll come back tomorrow night. Again, he said our very special guest is Dalia Mogahid, and we're continuing to do this every night, Monday through Friday, switching out guests, experts, hosts for you to enjoy. And there's lots of ways for you to stay connected to the work that we're doing. Stay connected to us through social media to get timely updates. If you like this video, like it if you don't mind. Sign up to receive our videos when they go live. Go to our CAIR website, www.cair.com. Sign up for our newsletter. It's right there in the middle. You can't miss it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you financially, please hit the red donate button so that we can continue to provide direct services to the community. As we have not reduced any of our services. Actually, we're only increasing because the needs are increasing, and your financial support, alhamdulillah, makes that possible by the mercy of Allah. And finally, the drum roll, we are unveiling a new resource for you, which is the CAIR Newsroom. You can go right now to it directly, www.cairnewsroom.com. And let me tell you why you're going to love this website. Lots of reasons. It has up-to-date updates on COVID-19 cases around the world, so you'll stay informed. It has links to this daily show informing you of what we're going to be doing, our topics, our experts. It has a facts page to make sure that you have the right information, no fluff. And then there's even community responses, and opportunity for community members to contribute original op-eds, a spirituality and well-being page to guide our iman and strengthen our deen during this time of struggle. And finally, we don't want to forget our experts page, where we source experts to answer those questions that you have been sending in, and send them out to readers all over the country. I'll be back to host sometime next week, inshallah. It's a privilege always to have shared this time with you. Thank you, and come back, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.